I've seen this movie 3 times in total since 8th grade. I watched it. I'd watch it more, admittedly, but this is a daunting movie. War and Peace 1968, directed by Segei Bondarchuk, the Soviet version of their film, is 8 hours long, split into 4 parts. That is a daunting task to sit down and watch this film. It's like Miyazaki Kobayashi's epic The Human Condition. That's a 9-hour-long movie split over the course of 3 films. Now, I just want to tell you that this is not about the making of the film, The Battle of Borodino. Look it up on IMDb if you want a lot of detail about the making, specifically of the battle sequences. But this film is the definition of passion, love, and dedication from a director. Segei Bondarchuk, who died twice on set. He was literally declared dead twice on set and then revived because of how much stress he was going through making this epic, and I mean epic. He died twice, once during the filming of this battle, the Battle of Borodino, which is what we're going to talk about today, and the other was during the burning of Moscow, the other big scene in the film. And by the way, the burning of Moscow in this movie, in War and Peace, 1968, makes the burning of Atlanta from Gone with the Wind look like a campfire. The scene is fucking huge. And Segei Bondarchuk was chosen to direct War and Peace by the Soviet government. You see, they were pissed off with the version directed by King Vidar with Henry Fonda. They didn't like it, and they said we could do it better. And so they hired Segei Bondarchuk to direct it. So this had full cooperation with the Soviet government, which is why the movie is as big as it is. And he was specifically chosen by the Soviet government. And also because of that, they also forced him to join the communist government, the Communist Party. But not only this, but he also acted in the damn thing. Segei Bondarchuk not only, was writing it and directing it, but he also acted in the movie. Like, how, my God, it's no wonder he died twice. In both sequences, both the Battle of Borodino and the Burning of Moscow, Segei Bondarchuk is in. Pierre, his character, Pierre, he's in it. So it's no wonder why he died twice. My God. But yet, it's also inspiring at the same time. Because if you look at behind-the-scenes footage, and there's lots of it, of him, behind the camera, you'll see Segei Bondarchuk genuinely behind the camera, holding the smoke machine, throwing dirt on people to represent an explosion, or and stuff like that. You see him genuinely getting down and dirty, which a lot of directors, especially now, wouldn't. They'd just be kind of sitting in the trailer being like, oh, that's good. That kind of director is missing in today's world, I believe. And it is really inspiring to watch those behind-the-scenes footage, which you can find on YouTube, and I highly recommend them. Because this was a director who would get on the floor and get down and dirty, and he was a true man of his craft as a result. Arguably, War and Peace 1968 is the most expensive film ever made. Unlike Avatar, everything you see in this movie is really there. It's often missaid that this movie had over 120,000 extras during the recreation of the Battle of Borodino, which is what we're going to be talking about, I swear. But that's actually probably a mistranslation. Bondarchuk actually said that they only had a little over 12,000 extras. And I'm like, just 12,000, huh? And most of these were members of the Red Army. They were Soviet troops. And what's funny is they actually had generals commanding these soldiers on set. Again, you look at the behind-the-scenes footage and you'll see the general standing with Segei Bondarchuk, listening to what Segei Bondarchuk had to say, and then they would communicate the orders to the soldiers. And you can tell that these are actually Soviet troops because there are some sequences, it's very clear that we see some Mosin Nagant rifles as a goof. And by the time that this movie was made, those were basically training rifles. But nevertheless, the Soviets had them in droves. And Mosin Nagants were bolt-action rifles made in 1911. I understand why they just said go ahead and use them. Because a lot of the people that were closer to the cameras, with a couple exceptions, did have genuine Russian flintlock muskets. But if you look at some of the distance, you can clearly tell that they are Mosin Nagants. The reason how I can tell they're Mosin Nagants is because of the bayonet. If you look at musket bayonets, they're much more rounded in terms of before they go into the knife section. Most of the guns are very angular. Some shots during the Battle of Borodino, you can just see people marching miles off in the distance. That's just how big of a scale this battle is. This battle recreation is. And I mean it. It's all fucking there. There is no faking this kind of depth and movement. I look back at this film and I'm like, this would all be CGI today. Most of this would be CGI today. Watching this battle sequence in the third film of, it leaves your mouth agape saying, holy shit. And I actually showed my roommate, Mark, this battle, and I'm about to tell you exactly what he said after the battle scene was finished. And I showed him the whole thing. The battle scene itself is an hour long, roughly. And he said to me, Adam, that was beautiful. And I'm like, yeah. Fucking was. This is, in my opinion, one of, if not the most beautifully beautiful, battle sequences ever put to film. And it's almost hard because I'm showing people some like picture clips of this battle doesn't work, and we'll get into why a little bit later. But it's because this battle has so much movement going on to it, and I mean genuine camera movement, not just shaky cam, that it's very hard to pick up a frame because it's like the shots just go together. Wonderfully done. So many fucking cannons, I'll tell you that much right now. There's literally shots where you see from one corner of the battle to the other cannons firing. Hundreds of these cannon replicas firing. Smoke just billowing out of the barrels, covering the screen. Only in Gettysburg, made in 1993, has ever topped the amount of cannons in this movie, in my opinion. Has ever topped the cannon bombardment in this film. So the real Battle of Borodino between the Russians and Napoleon was a total bloodbath. It is one of the bloodiest, if not the bloodiest, battle of the Napoleonic Campaign. Started off normal, like a typical battle, two armies marching against each other, but ended with both Napoleon, the Russian marshal, who unfortunately I forgot his name, just throwing soldiers forward, and it just became almost a literal meat grinder. Napoleon technically lost this battle due to just sheer numbers. Technically lost his battle, but the Russians had to withdraw because of how many people they lost. So if the Russians lost so many soldiers that they had to withdraw, how much did Napoleon lose? This was an utter bloodbath. I mean, it was said that you couldn't step anywhere on this field without stepping on a dead body. I've heard that also talked about Verdun, which is a movie I generally want to see made as well. And Napoleon was not much better off than the Russians at this point. He lost a lot of soldiers during this battle. And this movie beautifully captures the utter chaos of the battle, mostly from the POV of Pierre, played by Segei Bondarchuk himself. And it works because he's an outsider. And because he's an outsider, I can't think of an almost a greater way to depict this battle to the point where he too gets swept up into it because of how chaotic it becomes and everything like that. This battle becomes. He too gets swept up in the battle, and he's an outsider. And I always loved that aspect of this, of him in general. And this battle also has lots of these just long tracking shots with camera movements. And one in particular lasts 4 minutes towards the end of the battle, and it's one of the most impressive shots I've ever seen in cinema history. And it's extremely loud, and it's extremely bombastic. So much, there was just so much coordination and great camera work with less than stellar cameras. They wanted to use, it was basically crap film stock. And I mean crap film stock. Because the Russian government forced Bondarchuk to use only Soviet film stock, which Soviet film stock was never the best. Which explains why, despite this movie being made in 1968, the same year as, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, this movie looks a lot older. Because, the colors are faded, there's a lot more grain on screen, and it's because the film stock was crappier. And it doesn't help that this movie was not well preserved at all, unfortunately. But that being said, one shot in particular in this battle scene, the shot started with with a lot of smoke. All right, this is my favorite shot in the actual battle scene. So you start off kind of low, and you see just a lot of smoke. You can't see that far off in the distance. There's just so much smoke. And you see these wounded soldiers appear out of this smoke. And the camera moves up as we see some generals talking. Some cannons fire. And then the camera booms back down and slowly raises back up as we see hundreds of reenactors march to the drums forward as they slowly disappear into that smoke. And that's all one shot. And it's beautiful, and you just hear this really creepy and atmospheric music played against the sound of the drums beating and the soldiers marching. Completely atmospheric, and beautifully showed off just how fucking chaotic this battle was, because you can't help but sit there being like, all of those soldiers that are marching into the smoke are going to die, and as they disappear, that's sort of like a visual representation of the fact that they're going to die. And judging by the fact that I just talked about 2 shots in particular, the camera work is some of the best I've ever seen in this movie. And by the way, this scene, the Battle of Borodino, in War and Peace, invented the monorail camera shot. This was to simulate the POV of a cannonball, which would be used a lot later, but this was the first time it was ever used. And essentially they just, from high up, hooked the camera, let it go, bam, let it zip line down, and as the momentum would pick up, the speed would pick up, and thus it would make things look more chaotic. Some beautiful shots. There's one in particular in this film that I absolutely adore. Like, there's this one where you just see the camera, it shoots through literal flames as thousands of soldiers charge along with it, and it ends with an explosion going off right in front of the camera. And I'm like, this is some wicked impressive camera work here. And it's so beautiful as gravity just doesn't work. It's just so beautiful as gravity just does its work, and as the camera slowly picks up speed as the shot goes along, and as it's building up momentum, as the music is swelling around it, and you hear the soldiers charging forward and their deep guttural sounds, and you hear explosions going off. It's just such a wonderful cacophony of stuff that is rarely can be compared to today. Rarely can a film capture that today. And this was actually the first movie to use mechanical cameras set up to be controlled from the ground. You know, now it's commonplace to have somebody on the ground with a remote control while the camera's way up high, hundreds of feet in the air. This was the first time that's ever happened, and this is mounted on a huge crane. Literally an industrial-grade crane, and controlled with wheels from below in a small shelter with a monitor to see the shot. And this was back in 1968. This film we have to thank for creating a lot of, Video City, where, a lot of people would sit back and people would do LUTs and stuff like that. This was the first time this ever really happened in film. And again, I just want to remind everyone, this was back in 1968. For example, to talk about the camera movement, the absolute insane and awesome camera movement, there is one scene, and it's awesome because the behind the scenes actually captured what was happening and what was actually going to be shown in film. There's a shot that starts handheld, and then the cameraman literally sits down on a flat dolly, is wheeled into a trench so he can get a really low angle. Then he stands, sits on a crane, and it's raised over 500 feet in the air. And this is one shot. That's what I'm talking about, the amount of insane camera movements and insane choreography and insane scale. The insanity of the scale of this battle is, and it's so utterly impressive. Another shot has the cameraman walking with a huge shoulder rig, and this is before shoulder rigs were commonplace. And a lot of reasons why they could do this was because these cameras were smaller than, your normal American Panavision cameras and so on and so forth. Follows hundreds of soldiers that are charging forward. He then sits on a carpet, a literal carpet, has people wrap him up in fire-retardant blankets while the camera is still moving. And this shot's actually in the film, and it's gorgeous. And he is literally dragged into a deep trench where horses fall down almost on top of him, and burning hay falls right over him. Which is why none of the war films today look remotely as good, in my opinion, as the Battle of Borodino. Sure, they might be a little more realistic in terms of gore and stuff like that, but none of them look as good as the Battle of Borodino. Even without the extras, let's say, they don't look as good as this battle. The burning of Moscow is an even more impressive feat, because they had to literally wrap themselves and the cameras in fire retardant. You have people literally walking through buildings holding cameras that are on fire, and so on and so forth. Really, really impressive stuff. The use of sound in this battle is also phenomenal. The entire battle is just so loud and bombastic, especially towards the end. Like, the battle kind of like ramps up in intensity like the real battle, and it just gets louder and louder and more intense, and the camera movements become a lot more crazy and everything like that as the battle goes along. Picks up steam like the real battle. One of the main characters of War and Peace, I forgot his name, almost dies. And all of a sudden, like, this amazing music score also accompanies it. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it other than to help perpetuate the chaos of battle. Like, this isn't like an Akira Ifukube military march. The music in this is utterly chaotic, dark, brooding, and then all of a sudden extremely loud and chaotic. Somebody uploaded the actual soundtrack to this film, and you can listen to it. It's the last track, I think, from the record. Despite it building in intensity and getting louder and louder and louder and louder, suddenly everything gets real quiet. The soundtrack is really muddled. We can still hear explosion, but it's almost they put it almost like a muffler effect over the sound design of the film. And we hear this woman singing this beautiful lullaby. We see all this carnage, all of these dead bodies on the ground, the flames, some cannons still firing and stuff like that. Everything kind of slows down as well. The cinematography gets a lot more slow. Like, I think they were actually even shooting at a higher frame rate during these scenes, during many of these shots. And as we hear this lullaby, it keeps cutting to this woman cradling a baby. And it's something straight out of Intolerance, directed by D.W. Griffith back in 1916. I'm actually not sure if, the whole thing, comparing it to, a mother holding a baby, is actually in the book War and Peace or not. I tried reading the book, but I failed miserably because of how, quite frankly, dense that book is. And, that being said, you don't really know if this mother holding her child is real or not, or if it's more of a metaphorical image, like in Intolerance, the mother holding or rocking a baby in her crib, is more of a metaphorical image than anything else, a recurring metaphor. And I'm not sure if that's what this film is trying to present or not. And that's one thing that's great about this film, too, is that a lot of it can be interpreted in different ways, which is why I love reading forums about this film. Because it's quite clear that the movie does tend to break reality a few times. Even during the battle itself, the Battle of Borodino, when a character almost dies, the camera then goes from being almost on the ground, swoops up into the air, away from him looking in horror, to a bunch of trees. And suddenly the wind blows, and he is screaming how he wants to live. And it is a clear break from reality. To be honest, that's what I kind of think that this mother and child is as well. I think it could be a kind of the same thing, a sort of just a metaphorical image, just like him screaming in the trees, blowing in the wind. But what's really beautiful about it is that beautiful in a very gruesome way, is that during this battle, we see a Russian soldier walking through the mountains of bodies. I mean, almost literal mountains of bodies. Great cinematography. And it also keeps cutting back to a reverse shot of a French soldier who we saw marching earlier in the film. And during the battle, so the Frenchman who's walking, and they're walking towards each other, we see them in earlier bits of the film because we recognize their faces. And then suddenly it cuts to this wide shot, and again, this is being played as all the sound effects are really muffled, and really all we hear is the mother singing a lullaby. And all of a sudden, it's just a wide shot, and we see them both just moving past each other, back to their lines, and paying no attention to each other. So the Russian and the Frenchman just cross paths, no attempts to kill each other, and just keep walking. Like they just had it. Oh my god. Like, just the chaos of what just happened. Like, did it really just happen? And then it ends with a low camera shot that then booms upwards to see Napoleon on his famous white horse, looking at all the dead bodies. And this is presumably after the Russians withdrew. Just seeing him riding his horse, looking in utter disgust at all of these dead bodies, at just the amount of carnage that he has just witnessed and that he caused. And I mean it when I say that this truly is one of the best, if not objectively, best battle scenes ever to be put to film. You can watch clips of it on YouTube to get a little, glimpse of just how big and awesome this battle sequence, this battle recreation is. but not the whole battle. At least get a taste. I really recommend it. At least get a taste of how massive this scene is by looking it up. The Battle of Borodino, War and Peace, 1968. Buy the damned movie if you can. I cannot recommend it enough. I got lucky and bought a region-free import before it went out of print in its original aspect ratio. The version that I have, one has like a gajillion different subtitles, but it's out of print now. You can't buy it, and it was region free, and I got a hold of it, and it was very, very expensive. It was almost $70, but I said, fuck it, I want this movie really bad, and so I bought it. And it was presented in its original aspect ratio of 2:3:5:1. The subtitles are okay though, but the French-speaking scenes are never done, which that has always bugged me. But I'll tolerate it because the overall it's still a really amazing print, and arguably the best print out there. The only truly available copy of the films are terribly cropped, and I mean cropped. They're not even pan-scanned. It is literally just the left and right side of the screens are just literally chopped off, and nearly 2 hours of the movie is cut out. Almost 2 hours of that, because that version of the film is 6 hours long. The real version that we have is over 8 hours long, which that's the version that I have as well. But that's the most common DVD version of this film out there. A horrible, horrible version of it. I suppose if you speak Russian, you can watch it for free on the Mosso Film YouTube channel. But there is no subtitles, and I need to repeat that. There is no subtitles, and the film is in terrible quality. Not even in its original aspect ratio. It's not as bad as, it's certainly not as bad as the DVD that's the 4:3 horribly cropped version, but it's still pretty bad. It's presented in an aspect ratio of 2:0:0:1, which is the same aspect ratio as House of Cards is shot in. Get this fucking movie. Somehow, if you can, just go out there, buy this movie, if anything, just for this battle sequence. Oh my god, it seriously is one of, if not the best battle scenes I have ever seen depicted in a movie. And it's just great, and I hope I can convince you to go out there and get it by listening to me rambling on for 20 minutes. So, in the end, leave a comment if you've seen this movie telling me what you think of the film or anything like that. Or even tell me some of your favorite battle sequences and why you love them so much. Hit the subscribe button for all of it to get all the current videos that I'm putting out there. Like AN Productions on Facebook for all up-to-date information on what we are doing here at AN Productions, like the Godzilla Saga for all up-to-date information on how those books are going. And you can even follow now AN Productions on Twitter. We do have a Twitter now, and I like to post a lot of random shit. And so in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.